Shalom, and welcome to Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Mensch-Kight. In this podcast, you'll hear detailed and relatively unbiased information about Israeli politics and current events. So I've been looking for a good opportunity to kick off this podcast, and the recent news that the Knesset has formally dissolved Parliament and new elections are scheduled for March 23rd really is as good a time as any. It's been coming, a long time coming. We kind of figured this coalition, the unity government involving Bibi Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, was not going to survive. It was formed largely to address the coronavirus crisis. But we also knew that the likelihood that Bibi Netanyahu was going to hand over power to Gantz voluntarily was unlikely. So this isn't that great a surprise, but it has finally happened. And so now there is something really interesting to talk about, and that is an Israeli election. A complex, exciting, and intense experience for anyone who's watching it, especially watching it from abroad. And it's a lot of fun to watch from within Israel as well, as I'll tell you. So my name is Mensch-Kight. My background, I am a Jew of Ashkenazic descent, born and raised in America. I lived in Israel for over a year, where I earned my MBA at Bar Ilan University, one of Israel's top business schools. I'd say it's a toss-up between Bar Ilan and Herzliya IDC. Those are great business schools, and they have international programs taught in English if you are interested in attending. While I was attending, I had a volunteer gig with the State Control Committee, which was chaired at the time by Kadima Knesset member Yoel Hasson. And that gave me an opportunity to write some English correspondence, edit English correspondence, and help with translation for the State Control Committee. And that meant I got to write letters to ambassadors and to the OECD when they accepted Israel to thank them for accepting Israel into that organization and thus welcoming Israel to the developed world officially. And that's my experience there. I've been following Israeli politics since the early 90s when I was a child. It's a fascinating and often frustrating experience of following it, having hopes and aspirations and dreams for Israel, and seeing that some of that is able to come true and some of it not. And what can you do? I mean, you can watch from over here and see it. But going there and being part of it and seeing what was going on in 2009 and 2010 was really fascinating. And I'd like to be able to share with you my insights, what I learned there, and my unique perspective. As I said, I'm going to try to provide unbiased information. Obviously, I am a human being, and doubly so as a Jew. We're very opinionated. So I have my opinions and I have my biases, and I will do my best, to the best of my abilities, to claim my biases and let you know what my own thoughts are, so that as I give information, you'll have a better way of kind of filtering out my opinions and going with a little bit more of the objective information. So Israel doesn't have fixed elections like the United States. Israel is a multi-party proportional parliamentary system with a collegial cabinet. Now, that all is Greek to a lot of people, so I understand. I'll explain in more detail as I go forward the details of Israeli politics and the parties, the structures of the government, how it works, and what all that terminology means as we go through. But for right now, I'm just going to touch on some of the broad strokes, the basics, what's really going on kind of in the macro sense. And as I go forward, I'll be able to provide more background. And I'll probably do a couple episodes talking about the history of Israeli politics so you can get some idea of kind of how we got here, and in broad strokes. So at the moment, Israel has its election scheduled for March 23rd. The outgoing prime minister, if you want to call him that, the incumbent, Bibi Netanyahu, his name is Benjamin Netanyahu. If you know about Israeli culture, though, you know that especially when it comes to biblical names, nobody is Benjamin or Reuven or whatever. They're all by nicknames. They're Bibi or Ruby or something like this. So oftentimes, if somebody has a biblical name especially, they'll have some kind of a nickname that accompanies it. And so we just call him Bibi. And in Israel, it's a small country, so when you have 9-10 million people, basically everyone knows everyone, and so we refer to our leaders kind of affectionately by their nicknames and show a certain familiarity. So it's just Bibi. And if you don't know already, this election is very much about Bibi, because the last 3 elections have been about Bibi. Over the course of the last 2 years, Israel has had 3 elections. They're going to their 4th, and honestly, there's a good chance there could even be a 5th. In the Israeli political system, it's not as simple as 2 candidates run against each other and one of them wins. They, again, have a multi-party proportional system. So voters vote for political parties who receive their proportion of votes based on their proportion of seats in parliament based on their votes. So if a party receives, say, 10% of the vote, they should receive about 12 seats out of the 120 in the Knesset, in parliament. They might receive 13, depending on how the numbers kind of round up or what have you. In order to earn seats in parliament, a party must clear a threshold, a minimum number of votes. They have to have at least 3.5%. So if your party receives less than 3.5%, you don't have representation in parliament. And if you know a little bit about Israeli history, you know that early on, Israel did not have such a threshold. And so any party that could form could earn a seat in the Knesset if they earned just enough votes to warrant a seat, maybe 0.5%, 0.6%. And there were literally political parties that were just one person holding a seat in parliament. So the 3.5% threshold makes sure that in order to serve in parliament, you're going to have to earn 4 or 5 seats at a minimum, right? And a number of parties that can't clear the threshold, they can still serve in parliament because parties can run together on what's called a joint list. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In any case, in order to win an election, you have to win enough votes that your party comes in first, generally speaking. There are exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, your party has to have the largest number of seats, the main center-right or center-left party. And you have to be able to bring in enough coalition partners, smaller parties, often with narrower interests, in order to reach the majority, which is 61 votes. If you don't have 61 seats in your coalition, you don't win. So for the past several elections, Bibi Netanyahu's party, Likud, which means coalition, and their natural partners have won over 50 seats in each of the elections and have come close to winning outright, but they've fallen short. And right now, all of the other parties that are not Bibi Netanyahu's natural allies are aligned against him. They want him to leave politics and quit as prime minister. Why might that be? Well, for one thing, Bibi Netanyahu has been prime minister for 12 consecutive years. He also had a stint in the late 90s for over 3 years as prime minister. So this is a man who holds the record for the longest time served as prime minister in Israel, having beaten David Ben-Gurion's record, Ben-Gurion being the founding prime minister, Israel's first prime minister. I'm going to apologize in advance if there are any Israeli listeners who happen to listen. I'm sure my thick American accent in the pronunciation of Hebrew names and Hebrew words is going to be apparent, but that's okay. It's going to be okay. To American listeners, I'll try to explain when I use any kind of Hebrew terminology, translate and explain what it means, so that you'll have insight on that. So Benjamin Netanyahu has been prime minister for a very long time, and he has grown very powerful, and some believe he has grown corrupt, and that's certainly a possibility. There are some charges pending against him that claim that he has engaged in direct quid pro quos with large companies in Israel, although admittedly some of the witnesses have recanted, and those cases are built largely on circumstantial evidence. So there is some... let's just say you could make the argument that those charges are trumped up, you might say, in order to try to get Bibi Netanyahu to quit or to hurt him politically so that he cannot remain in office. But you could also argue that those charges are valid. Prior Israeli prime ministers, in fact, the previous prime minister before Bibi Netanyahu, Ehud Olmert, was charged with corruption and was actually convicted and served a sentence. So corruption has been a big problem in Israel, and it is more than likely that if Bibi Netanyahu is engaged in any kind of quid pro quos or inside deals like that he has covered his tracks well enough not to be caught. But it would not be unprecedented that maybe he did this. In any case, there is a strong argument on the right that the charges would collapse as soon as the court if the case were brought to trial, and it's mostly a political maneuver. Again, you can look at that either way. The important part to know is that charges are pending, and there's been a lot of pressure to get Bibi to quit as prime minister to face the charges. Meanwhile, Netanyahu, who has held on to power longer than any other prime minister in Israel, has an incredible power to stay in office. And I want to emphasize this point very strongly because Bibi has his detractors and he's got a lot of haters out there. But Bibi Netanyahu is extremely popular. He is the one prime minister who earns consistently the highest approval from the voters. Right now, if according to various polls, if all of the various candidates for prime minister are polled, Bibi Netanyahu wins about 30%, and his next competitor, who is right now Gidon Saar, is clear down at 15 or 16%. In a head-to-head matchup, Bibi comes in around 40% and Saar around 36, just to give you an example. So he is very popular personally, and the parties that are his natural allies, again, have come in just short of a majority. So Netanyahu is winning the plurality. Now, in an electoral system like ours, which is majoritarian, that is, it's based on single-member elective districts, geographic elective districts, parties that win pluralities of greater than 40% have a tendency to win a majority, because that's the way our electoral system works. But in Israel, in order to win a majority, you actually have to win 51%. And those parties that are aligned with Netanyahu have failed to do that 3 times already. And the president has tapped Bibi to form a coalition each time, and Bibi has been unable to find 61 votes. And then the president will tap his opponent, in the previous instances, former General Benny Gantz, and Gantz will fail to form a coalition as well, forcing the Knesset to arrange for new elections. Elections were held in the spring of 2019, again in the fall of 2019, in the spring of 2020, and in each of those instances, again, as I just described, neither Netanyahu nor Gantz could form a coalition until the crisis brought on by the coronavirus brought the two together. They formed a unity government, and they had planned for Netanyahu to transition from being prime minister and allow Gantz to take over as prime minister at some point in the coming year as part of the coalition agreement. The only thing that could prevent that transition from happening was if the budget failed to pass. And Netanyahu, being someone who is very clever at staying in office, of course, waited the 6 months until December of this year and prevented a budget from passing. So, of course, no budget, no coalition agreement, new elections. And conveniently, Netanyahu clings to power still. So this is where Israel finds itself right now. Benny Gantz, for forming the coalition, for joining the coalition, has lost a lot of his popularity. He was seen as a strong military leader, someone who could provide at least the same kind of competent leadership to Bibi. And although he's seen as center-left, initially the policies he laid out were fairly similar to Netanyahu's. So it seemed like we had a kind of a viable candidate to replace Bibi. At least that was how he was portrayed. And after a couple of elections, it became pretty clear that he didn't quite have what it took to win. And Netanyahu was able to hang on to power and remain as prime minister. This emergency government, of course, meant that Gantz joined a government with Netanyahu after swearing up and down and promising to the voters that he would not. And that has caused his popularity to collapse, and his party's polling about 4.5% presently, which means he might get 4, 5, or 6 seats in the Knesset. In fact, depending on how the voters treat him, he may fail to clear the threshold and his party may be gone. One of the interesting facets of Israeli politics is that a political party can be huge in one Knesset and then vanish in the next. And there's really no way to predict how the voters will reward a party or punish a party. And sometimes voters make last-minute decisions. And so a party that may be polling, for 7 or 8 seats now, at the last minute could get 14 seats or 15 seats because at the last minute voters just decided, we think this guy would be better, this party and its leader would be better. So this kind of thing can happen. So before I go into discussing the rise of Gideon Sa'ar and his place now as the main competitor against Netanyahu, I want to take a step back and discuss 3 other issues that are kind of interesting in the political landscape right now in Israel. The first is that there's a changing of the guards in Israeli politics right now, a change of generations. Israel had a founding generation of leaders, people like David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, and that lot. You could include Shimon Peres in that, who founded Israel and brought it to the stage that it is in now. A second generation, the generation of Yitzhak Rabin. That generation fought in the various wars that defended Israel and gave it success against its hostile Arab neighbors, and then ultimately was able to make peace. And Bibi Netanyahu was in that generation. The next generation is a younger set who have largely grown up in relatively peaceful times, with the exception of the conflict in Lebanon and smaller actions, the various intifadas of the Palestinians and the rocket attacks of 2006. But for the most part, they've known a more secure Israel. And that generation is now coming to its own, and that is represented by leaders like Gideon Sa'ar. A new generation. And we see the same kind of thing here in the United States. After all, we had George W. Bush Sr., who left office in 1993, who was the last president, for example, to fight in the Second World War. And then after him came Bill Clinton, who was the first of the boomer generation to be president. And every president who has followed has been a member of the boomer generation, all the way up to Donald Trump. And now it's probable then that whoever the next president of the United States is going to be after Donald Trump and or Joe Biden is going to be a member of Generation X, and possibly in the future, someone from the millennial generation. So we see generational changes over here as well. Well, in Israel, they have this as well. Netanyahu represents an older generation that fought in the various wars and struggled for Israeli independence and freedom, and to keep and protect the Israel that they inherited. And this new generation has inherited the blessings, certainly the prosperity that has resulted from the work of the older generation. Right. So the other thing that's going on, the other major macro issue that's going on in Israeli politics is the shifting pendulum of Israeli politics. When Israel was founded, it was founded very much as a left-wing country, essentially by people who were, if not communists, certainly strong social democrats. And they were very left, and they governed the country in that vein. Over time, eventually, the right was able to pull together in a coalition, Likud, that's where the Likud party comes from, means coalition. They formed this new political party and were able to come to power in the 70s with Menachem Begin. Now, since that time, Likud and Labor Alignment, the main left party, went back and forth, struggling for who was going to lead Israel. But as of 2001, the defeat of the last Labor Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, meant that since then, the center-right has been dominant. Likud won in 2001 with Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, and eventually he broke off from Likud and formed a new party called Kadima, and unfortunately, he had 2 strokes and was no longer able to function as the leader of that party, and the party fell to Ehud Olmert. Again, we'll talk more about that in the future. And so this created a new center-left that is far to the right of where the old left used to be. And that vein of the center-left, which was originally filled by Kadima, later was to be filled by a new party called Yesh Atid, or the Future Party, which is led by Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid is a former journalist, and his father was a prominent Israeli politician. So he's well known, and he now kind of fills that center-left void, if you will. And Benny Gantz stepped into a similar vein, sort of center-right. And now we have still Yesh Atid sitting there. But Labor, the far-left party, is vanishing from the Knesset this go-round. They've fallen way down in the polls and have finally kind of fallen out of parliament. The only left party that exists now is Meretz. Meretz is a kind of left-wing protest party that has existed for a number of years, and congratulations to them as the dinosaur of the Knesset. They're the only, I want to say, the only remnant of the Israeli left of a previous generation. Now the new left is kind of a center left. The pendulum has swung so far to the right that now probably 2/3 of the Knesset is going to be made up of parties that are considered the right bloc, or parties generally to the right of center. David Horowitz, who is always offering insightful commentary about Israeli politics, noted that the pendulum, he believes the pendulum has swung as far to the right as it's going to swing, and that it might in the future swing back toward the center left. But as I was saying before, the left has changed quite a bit. So the left of the founding of Israel is gone now, and the new left is kind of a center left, largely free market party, not the old pro-peace socialist parties of the past. And it's going to be interesting to see how this goes with Israel moving so far to the right. So that's the big picture. Generational change going on, the pendulum swinging to the right in Israeli politics, a right that is free market, nationalist, and opposed to, I want to say, land for peace, the two-state solution with the Palestinians, which was arranged by Yitzhak Rabin and the left-wing governments of earlier generations. But they are also now part of the peace agreements with various Arab countries. Now, in addition to Egypt and Jordan, which had already made peace with Israel, we have the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, and possibly more Muslim countries to come. So this is kind of the new age for Israel. In any case, the Israeli right since 2001, and especially since Bibi Netanyahu took over in 2009, has brought Israel greater prosperity. As they pushed, especially Netanyahu, free market policies, Israel has blossomed as a startup country where they are developing a lot of high-tech gadgets, a lot of software. They're the largest number of startup companies per capita in Israel. Everyone's got a startup, everyone's got a plan, and the younger generation have experienced a lot of prosperity, much greater security than in previous years, by far, and greater political stability. Israeli politics has been unstable in recent decades, and now, thanks to Netanyahu, it has been fairly stable and fairly consistent. Whether you like that or not depends on where you sit in the Israeli political spectrum. Obviously, if you're someone who's on the left, you would say, yes, politics is stable and consistent, but it's also wrong. If you're on the right, you might say, well, it's not perfect, but it's consistent and it's generally in the direction that I like. Right. So these are some of the big trends that are going on in Israeli politics at the moment. So the very big surprise that's come out of this election is Gideon Sa'ar. Gideon Sa'ar has been a member of Likud for a number of years, going back to the 90s. He is a well-known and well-established Israeli politician who's been on the right a little bit to the right of Netanyahu at times and to the left of him at other times. He's known as someone who does not support the two-state solution. He's known as someone who is for a strong national defense and very similar to Netanyahu on most issues. He's also advocated for women's rights at various times in his career as well. There are rumors going around now that his wife is left and many of his friends are left. As I like to joke, if you live in Israel and you have more than one friend, then you have friends who are on the left. Israel is not culturally speaking, not a right-wing country. Politically, people have shifted rightward, but Israelis still have fairly left-wing views, and especially when it comes to social issues, with the exception of the ultra-religious, most Israelis are far to the left of the American mainstream, for sure. So the argument, he has left-wing friends. Yeah, so does everyone in Israel. So there's a lot of rumors going around right now as Netanyahu tries to attempt a character assassination against Gideon Sa'ar. Gideon Sa'ar is younger, but certainly a capable and competent leader who could serve as prime minister and do at least as good a job as Netanyahu. In that sense, he's just from a younger generation and not from that more mature, older generation. Gideon Sa'ar has formed a new political party called New Hope, and at this point, New Hope is polling around 18 to 20 seats. Now, that is about 1/6 of the Knesset, but as small as that seems, that's actually pretty significant for a brand new party that has never before sat in the Knesset before. As I said before, when they poll Israelis on various prime minister candidates, he comes in at about 16%, behind Bibi's 30%. And when he's polled head-to-head against Netanyahu, he comes in about 36%, just a few points behind, but well over a third, which is kind of where you need to be an effective prime minister. So he has what it takes for sure to challenge Netanyahu. He has some good numbers, some strong numbers. But at the same time, Benny Gantz had similar numbers and didn't get there as well. Bibi Netanyahu is really good at staying in office, and he is really good at driving from Likud those who aspire to leadership. There's just this trail of destruction that lies behind him as he's driven off others who could challenge him for the leadership. And Gideon Sa'ar is the last person who did that, the most recent challenger. We didn't expect him to win the Likud primary to become the leader, but he did make a good challenge. Well, now he's challenging the prime minister in the open political field as the head of a new party. There are several other parties in parliament. I'll go into them in a little bit more detail in the future, but for right now, just to know that the center-right is made up of Likud, that is Bibi Netanyahu's party, which is polling around 28 seats, maybe 30 seats, kind of in that ballpark. Yamina, the party led by Naftali Bennett, which is the national religious party of old, and his party is polling somewhere around 14%. New Hope, with Gideon Sa'ar, is polling around 20%, and Yisrael B'Teinu, which means Israel is our home, is largely a Russian secular rightist party led by Avigdor Lieberman, and he is the one of those who's, like Sa'ar, very much opposed to Netanyahu staying in office. He's polling around 6 or 7 seats. And then there are the two religious parties. Now, I tend to cast Israeli politics in 4 groups, the political parties in 4 groups, which is the secular right, the religious right, the center left, and the Arab left. But generally speaking, they speak of Israeli politics in terms of right bloc and left bloc. And, in those terms, the Orthodox parties are distinctly on the right in that sense. But they're not economically right because they seek social benefits, significant social welfare benefits for their community. And a lot of secular Israelis are wondering why they're paying very high taxes so that ultra-Orthodox men can go study in religious schools instead of working. And I'll go into more of that in the future in greater detail. Again, I said I would state some of my biases, and while I feel that the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, are mistreated in some ways, I very much dislike the special privileges that they receive and the lifestyle that they live, which, in my opinion, represents the shtetl in Russia and Poland more than it does an effort to create a new Jewish nation. There are two ultra-Orthodox or Haredi political parties. One is United Torah Judaism, which represents the Ashkenazic or European Jewish tradition, and the other is Shas. Shas is an acronym that represents Talmud, the commentaries on the Torah, and that is the largely Sephardic party. And these two political parties are the religious right. Bibi Netanyahu is close allies with them. He's given them a lot of political power, a lot of political clout, and many of their political demands in order to keep them as his allies. And so any government that he forms, he's going to form with these religious parties, at least one of them. And for a long time, a lot of Israelis, and again, this is my bias as well, have sought a secular government without these religious parties. So it'll be interesting to see if that is possible or if that comes to pass at this election. So that's the religious parties. On the left, there are now three parties, and that could change depending on who else throws their hat in the ring or what happens in the political situation as it develops and as new parties announce their candidacy or what have you. But those parties are, in no particular order, the Future Party, Yesh Atid, which is led by Yair Lapid, and he's polling around 16 seats. The Blue and White Party represents the colors of the flag of Israel, blue and white, led by Benny Gantz, which is polling, as I just said earlier, around 5 or 6 seats, may not clear the threshold. And Meretz is a left-wing party, and they're polling at about 6 or 7 seats as well. And then there is what's called the Joint List, and those are the Arab left parties. Most of them are basically Arab communist parties that are opposed to the existence of Israel in the first place. Some of them are Islamist parties, Islamist nationalist parties like Ra'am. But generally speaking, they don't participate in the Knesset in the way that the Jewish parties do. They don't recommend prime ministers, they don't join coalitions, and they spend a lot of time protesting the existence of Israel, insulting Israel, and that kind of thing. But they do exist, and they do represent their constituents. A significant portion of Israelis are Muslims and Arabs. There's also the Druze and the Bedouins. So they are represented largely by those political parties. So briefly, what are the prospects and possibilities for the election outcome? Obviously, we're about 90 days out as I'm recording, and a lot can happen between now and then. So what's going to happen? Who knows? In Israeli politics, expect the unexpected. At this point, there are still the possibilities that other candidates might throw their hat in the ring, that new parties might be formed. We might see some new action on the center-left. We might see a new center-right party form. There are always opportunities for surprises. But generally speaking, if things continue in the vein that they are, we have basically 4 likely outcomes that we're going to see. One is, I'll just get this out of the way, and that is hung parliament, what the British, in British political terminology, they call hung parliament. And that is no one wins, where Bibi Netanyahu doesn't have enough seats to form a coalition, where Gideon Sa'ar will not join his coalition, and neither will any of the other parties that are generally opposed to Netanyahu, and they're unable to form a coalition, and the Knesset has to dissolve again and arrange for new elections 90 days hence. So we could have elections in the late summer or early fall, again, if this election doesn't produce some kind of result. So that's one possibility, that basically the election is inconclusive as the previous 3 have been. Another possibility is that Bibi could win this time. It is not beyond the scope of possibilities. It's not implausible or impossible that Bibi and his natural allies could win a majority. Generally speaking, even though Bibi and Naftali Bennett do not get along, they don't really like each other, they are very closely politically aligned. Bennett, if anyone, is to the right of Bibi on a lot of issues, but he is likely to form a government if he sees that government being beneficial to his constituents and his more right-wing political interests. The ultra-Orthodox parties, UTJ and Shas, obviously have it in their best interest to work with Bibi Netanyahu, and those parties altogether are polling somewhere in the 55-56 range, so just shy of a majority. So they would have to find someone who's willing to join the government with them in order to win. But if something should happen, let's say Gideon Sa'ar collapses in the polls and somehow Bibi Netanyahu and Likud surge, and he gets maybe 5, 6, 7 more seats, those parties may have enough seats to win a majority and govern in coalition for a full 4-year term. Again, there's no set fixed election in Israel, so at any time that the coalition breaks up or the government becomes unpopular, in those 4 years they can go to early elections. If the prime minister fails a vote of confidence, they can end up in early elections, although the affirmative vote of confidence, which I'll talk about in the future, could negate that prospect. But in any case, sometime in the next 4 years, or at the end of 4 years at the latest, new elections will have to take place. So that's a possibility. Another possibility is that Netanyahu will not win outright, but that somehow he will use his silver tongue to convince Gideon Sa'ar or someone to join a coalition with his natural allies and form a government that might last into the future. He might, for example, sign an agreement that says he'll serve as prime minister for the first 2 years, then hand power over to Sa'ar for the second 2 years. This was done once in Israeli political history in the 1984 election when there was a hung parliament. Ariel Sharon, behind the scenes, negotiated a deal between then Labour Prime Minister Shimon Peres and the leader of Likud, Yitzhak Shamir, that they would share power that way. And so Peres was prime minister for 2 years, and then Shamir for 2 years, and then they went to new elections where Likud was able to form a government for 4 years under Shamir. This could be done again. However, as I just described before, Benny Gantz signed the exact same kind of agreement with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu took the one path he had out. So it's back to that question. Will Gideon Sa'ar be willing to take the same step, the same promise from Netanyahu? As the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. If Sa'ar is willing to take that deal with Netanyahu and form a government with him, he might find himself making a huge political error. Netanyahu in the past has worked with a number of aspiring young leaders, including Yair Lapid at one time, who was finance minister for a couple of years. And these political figures have a tendency to lose popularity because they worked with the government, they joined the coalition with Netanyahu, and he finds ways to get their hands dirty with the things that their constituents don't approve of in the government and causes their popularity to collapse. Benny Gantz is only the most recent victim of the same strategy. So Gideon Sa'ar would not be very wise to join a government with Netanyahu. That doesn't mean that someone else might not. Maybe Avigdor Lieberman might change his mind and Yisrael Beitenu could join the government. Who knows? But the point is, it is a possibility that Bibi will find one of his opponents willing to join him and they could form a government that way. Finally, the last possibility, and this is kind of the exciting new prospect, is that Gideon Sa'ar and his new party, which are polling up at 20 seats, could form a government along with other allies on the center-right and center-left without Netanyahu, a center-right secular coalition. And if they are able to pull that off, if they're able to accomplish that, that may very well be the end of Netanyahu's political career. His argument for avoiding the charges against him has been that he's prime minister and he doesn't really have time to face trial, and he's refused to leave the office of prime minister in order to face trial. So that could create some interesting possibilities there. But if he is cast out into the minority, into leading the minority in this case, the opposition, he might find himself in the doghouse politically. And he may either have to resign as head of Likud, or Likud may kick him out, in which case Gideon Sa'ar could, who's well known and well loved in Likud as well, could merge his party back in with Likud and lead the country forward that way, which would create an even more stable political situation under his leadership. So there are a few things that could happen here. But basically, those are our four scenarios. There'll be a hung parliament and new elections. Bibi will win outright. Bibi will not win outright, but will find someone willing to join a government with him from among his political opponents, or Gideon Sa'ar will be able to form a coalition and govern without Netanyahu, and that may very well lead to Netanyahu's political end. And I only say may because he could hold on as leader of the Likud party and wait for the coalition to break up or lose popularity or for new elections to be called, where he could make a play to return to office. This happened once before. He had left office as prime minister amid scandal in 1999. He returned as finance minister in 2003 under Ariel Sharon's government. And when Sharon split from Likud to form his new Kadima party, Netanyahu took what was left of Likud and was in the doghouse for a few years. Likud had 12 seats in the Knesset and looked like they were really in bad shape. But in the next election, he was able to bring Likud back and form a government. Well, I will go into more detail on these issues in future episodes. This is an introductory episode to the election, so now you have some idea what's going to happen in the election and kind of how the chessboard is set up, let's say. And as we go forward, as new political developments arise, I will discuss those in future episodes. I'll also start to work on episodes describing Israeli politics in more detail and the nature of the political system. Until then, I will say thank you for listening, and להתראות. Goodbye.
אולי נפליגה בספינות מחוף אילת עד חוף ועל המשחטות הישנות יטעינו תפוחי זהב. כל זה אינו משל ולא חלום, זה נכון כאור בצהריים.